The Kremlin says that Russia is totally stable, that everything is fine. But every Friday, there's a different story that is being told. At 21% interest, Russian banks are borrowing cash. They need the emergency cash just to survive to another week. And since April 2025, the central bank has been running weekly repo auctions. Lifelines disguised as liquidity tools. But in reality, they are CPR for a system that is dying. Each week, the Kremlin prints or borrows about 0.6% of the entire economy just to keep the banks alive. Over an entire year, that equals about 30% of GDP, roughly the size of Russia's federal budget. No healthy economy needs weekly cash transfusions. That's a very bad sign. This is not management, this is resuscitation. And during 2008, by comparison, in the United States, during the financial crisis, the Federal Reserve's emergency lending peaked at only about 1.6% of GDP for the year. Russia now does 20 times that every single week. This is not fine-tuning policy. This is keeping a dying system on life support. The strain is visible far beyond Moscow. It's visible in all parts of Russia. And it's not just the fuel shortages, 1,200 kilometers or 750 miles from the front. Banks have lost $12 billion in deposits since the spring. Inflation is devouring wages. Shelves are becoming empty. And though there are slogans of strength that Russia will persevere, the underlying math suggests that perhaps it will not. In fact, it suggests that today the problems have reached a new level. Because when a state must print money every 7 days just to survive, it's not really governing anymore. It's begging its own system not to die. The myth of Russian stability unravels under basic scrutiny. It becomes very clear that Russia is up against the wall, and things are about to get far worse. My name is Jason Smart. I'm a special correspondent for the Kiev Post, and I happen to be a national security advisor. What we're seeing inside of Russia is pretty fascinating. And though initially many people refused to accept the idea that perhaps Russia would lose, that Ukraine would win, today more people seem to be picking up on that. More people realize that Russia is a total disaster. And let's look into those numbers today. Let's look at what's going on inside of Russia, and you can judge for yourself. You can reach a conclusion very easily that Russia cannot afford this war that it started. But help me get out the truth to more people of what's happening inside of Russia, that is a country that is losing to Ukraine, and what's really happening here, where I am right now, in Kiev, Ukraine. What is happening here in a country that is fighting for freedom, and a country that is going to be victorious in its fight against Russian tyranny. All I ask you to do, please like this video, subscribe to this channel, consider becoming a channel member today. We're close to our goal of 250,000 subscribers. So I appreciate all of you who are already subscribing, and those of you who have not yet done so, please do so. Thank you. So people are predicting quite predictably when they see all these shortages, when they see that everything is getting worse. Those with little money are trying to do what they can. They try to take their cash and buy gold, to buy yuan, to buy anything other than rubles, because the ruble itself has very questionable value. Will it continue to have any value is a legitimate question to ask. But today we see that there's a different thing going on. We see that the fact is that today there's a disappearance of the ability to even get money in Russia. And it's not just because the banks won't lend it to you. It's also because the government will not let you have your money. As we've discussed before, the banks are limiting just simple people. Keep in mind the average Russian only makes about $900 a month. Those people, how much savings could they really have? How much cash do they have stored up in these banks? Presumably very little. And yet the banks won't let them take out their cash. Why is that? Well, because the bank simply lacks liquidity. It doesn't have the ability to give everybody their money. And today, they're desperate. They're desperate enough that they are taking huge loans from the government to keep running, to prevent runs on the bank. So one of the things that is affecting Russia gravely are the ongoing drone attacks. And as you know, we will get into that right now, but one of the ongoing things we've been doing in this channel is fundraising for drones. And today, for any donations that are made, an anonymous donor will match the donation. So if you give $50 for drones, somebody will match that. he'll give 50, which means there's a total of $100 going for life-saving drones. And the patches behind me are from the different units whom we've given drones to. And after this one right here next to me that says, "Make Russia Small Again," you'll see the patch for the 67th Mechanized Brigade. The next one's the 4th Rubles Brigade. The next one's the 128th Mountain Assault Brigade. The next one's the 225th Assault Regiment. The next one is the 93rd Holod Yar Mechanized Brigade. Then there's National Guard. And the last one is the 505th Marine Battalion. These units greatly appreciate all of you who have contributed to them getting these drones. It is truly making a difference in this war, and something for which I am tremendously thankful of your support. But for those of you who have a science background, you come from having studied computer science or engineering or chemistry, please check out the other link in the first pinned comment below, and that's for Technology United for Ukraine. We're looking for scientists who are able to contribute their knowledge to help Ukraine develop better ways to defend itself. Thank you. So anyways, let's go back to what's going on. Let's look at what's happened, for instance, in the case of Irkutsk. We saw there that following the Ukrainian attacks, only 2 of the 7 local stations remained open. We saw that drivers now are limited to how many liters of gasoline they can buy. And officials, of course, try to blame this on something else. They try to say it's not because of the Ukrainian attacks. But there seems to be a very strong correlation between attacks occurring and restrictions on how much gasoline people can buy. It seems very clear that they are directly related to each other. But today, the Russian government has a different problem. And that's that oil revenues have beginning to slump. The Russian government is wholly dependent on oil sales. But in September 2025, oil and product export, its revenue fell by about $13.3 billion. Now, keep in mind, pre-war, they typically got about $20 billion per month. So when you see it slipping $13.3 billion, that's a lot. That decline signals a weaker tax receipts for the budget and for the banks. But there's something else going on with Russian oil, and those are the discounts. Russia is forced to give out steep discounts on its oil. It knows that many countries don't want to buy what is soon to be even more sanctioned oil. So those discounts, they are deepening. We see that Urals benchmark, it lagged Brent in October. Consider this. The Urals discount widened to nearly $13 per barrel. Brent, which is going for about $60 per day, only has an actual value then, realized price, in the 40s because there's such steep discounts being given. This is something that affects all of Russia. Not just the banks, not just the oil companies, but the oil revenue. The government needs this money. But now, it's getting less of it. And regional governors, they're already acknowledging what a serious problem there is. They're confirming the fact that there are shortages, that across the region, people are having to change their work schedule. They're having to reorganize their lives and their businesses totally. Because right now, there's a serious lack of fuel. The energy ministry has restricted transparency about how much fuel is actually being produced. In fact, for the first time since the 1990s at least, the Russian government today is releasing very little data of what they're producing. And that's because they don't want to admit what we all know. Ukrainian drones are turning the table over on the Russian economy. The federal budget today in Russia is continuing to bleed. From January to August, the deficit reached $53 billion. That equals 98% of last year's full deficit. And still, there is another couple months left in this year. Russia has very few places where it can go look for money. Russia's liquid national wealth fund, its share has fallen quite sharply. In fact, the liquid portion today of the national wealth fund, it's about 1.8% of GDP. Now, keep in mind, before the war, it was about 7%. But today, about 75% of the liquid buffers have effectively vanished. Now they have illiquid assets, and that's not very useful when you need cash. The finance ministry today has downgraded its 2025 oil and gas projections. The cut of about 15%, which is roughly $200 billion, that's now a very big deal. The government can barely make ends meet. And again, how will it do it if it's expected to be producing less oil? That means lower assumptions, and if there's lower assumptions, we can assume that regional transfers will also be lowered. The pensions will be lowered. Everything will be affected by this. The soldiers in Russia should question, will they get paid And will they get paid on time? With the reserves beginning to shrink more and more across Russia, we can assume that things will get tighter. But it's not limited just to the government. Businesses are also suffering in Russia. The Russian corporate rates are about 3 times prevailing United States rates. They're roughly double what we would see somewhere like Turkey. The investment pipeline is stalling, and that's where money gets even more expensive. And that's why bank lenders are so worried. Bank leaders are warning of shrinking margins, rising risk. Sberbank Rossi, VTB banks, some of the biggest in Russia, report growing non-performing loans and tighter margins. Consumer and mortgage delinquencies are rising, and at the same time, we see that there's less capital. Households themselves report the same thing. The 90-day delinquencies, well, they've only continued to climb on cards, autos, mortgages, refinancing. All of these things are starting to catch up. All of these things are becoming unaffordable. But now the government in Russia is trying to do something else. The government is trying to generate more revenue with more taxes. But a new value-added tax on financial services, that's beginning this year. But it's going to erase about $3.4 billion of income for the banks. 9% of bank profits will disappear. So the government, recognizing that its banks don't have enough money, is increasing their taxes. They're trying to take more money yet from those banks. And those banks are worried because their major clients, their major partners, such as the companies that work in oil, they don't have the cash. But it's not just oil. Look at coal. The coal sector, it lost nearly $3 billion by July 2025. Right now, it's the worst crisis they've had in at least 30 years. And we see the cascade of closures. Look at the financings disappeared and what it does to the companies. 23 companies have already shut down operations. 53 more say that closure is imminent. And it's all because the coal industry is imploding. We see the furloughs. We see people being laid off. We see the huge number of Russians forced to work second jobs because they are technically full-time employees, but their employers don't pay them to be full-time anymore. They tell them to go take a day off every week or a few days a month without pay because the government won't let them be fired. But at the same time, the government wants to be able to prove to everybody that they're fully employed. But that means that that person who's fully employed, he can't really take another full-time job nor a part-time job that pays enough. He gets further behind because the government is more worried about protecting its image that it has full employment. Corporate bankruptcies are continuing to shoot up. And it's not limited just to the oil and gas nor to just the coal industry. Look at construction, look at transport, look at metals. It's one wave after another. In fact, personal bankruptcies are up 35% year over year. All of these things are signs of an economy that are doing very not well. And there's other signs, secondary things that we can look for. At least 38 Russian tycoons, business leaders, have died suspiciously since 2022. And 10 of those deaths were recorded on the balconies or the windows of their houses, which probably lets you know how they really died. But today, there's something else going on. We realize the amount of dirty cash being taken out of Russia, it's a huge amount. In fact, analysts say that many of these deaths were linked to embezzlement, to hidden state funds that have been taken off the books, roughly $160 billion worth. That's about 9% of Russia's GDP. The sum roughly matches the annual defense budget of Russia. So when you see these people die or going out of windows, you might ask why. Well, typically they have their fingers in some stuff that they should not. Things like money stolen from the state, which they were supposed to help wash, which they were supposed to get to somebody's offshore account. But now that they've done that, they've done their service. The people who control that money, those billions of dollars, knowing that it's illegally taken, they don't want that to become well known. They don't want the world to know they've stolen all this money. And so they're stuck doing what they do now, trying to kill off those who know too much. Today, the Russian government likes to brag that everything is well, that it's able to go through these sanctions and not feel anything. But all the evidence, after doing a deep dive on the Russian economy, studying specifically the banking sector, specifically what is going to happen next, never more than today am I certain that Russia is losing. And the collapse of the Putin regime, it could be at any point in the imminent future. Thank you for watching. Please like this video, subscribe to this channel, consider becoming a channel member, and leave your comments below. Let me know where you're from. As always, thank you for supporting Ukraine.